All right, everyone. So far we've talked about, when developing a project, an interactive project with user experience, we've talked about doing understanding or having empathy for the user. That comes in the, area of a persona. Doing research, researching what exactly does your audience want, we did research. You guys in theory are working on research to learn about the demographics of your audience and, the psychographics. Why do people do the things that they do? The next thing when developing a product, especially in a digital product, is to have something called a micro interaction. Okay. What does micro mean? Micro means small. Interaction is an interaction. So a micro interaction in a digital space is some sort of interaction that it accomplishes a single task that gives data. Okay. So for instance, this was taken from my email system, right? And if you look at this symbol here, it's a little envelope with a number. Okay. So if an email system as a whole is a complicated thing. You have the ability to send email, to receive email, to, archive emails. And, if you use Gmail, there's a built-in chat system and there's other things, right? So this is one part, one little interaction. What's the interaction? The interaction is, well, this thing is telling me how many unread messages I have. That's it. That's all it does. So it's micro in the fact it gives me a small piece of information. Okay. All it does is, convey this particular data. If I was to check one of my messages, this would go from, 267 to 266. And then, I realize that I've read some of my email. Okay. Another way I always like to kind of describe micro interactions, I kind of always like to use Instagram because I think Instagram is one of the best examples of this. All right, so here's Instagram. So let's say I wanted to like my friend's post here, right? This is a picture of his cat. There's a like button, right? I click on it. This little animation happens. It goes from being a hollow heart to being a solid heart. And what I've done is I've liked the photo. Okay, what does liking mean? I don't know. It's a state, right? There were 17 people liked it. I added my name to it, so now 18 people like it. What does liking something do? It gives information to the user that people quote unquote like it. It may go into the algorithm of how, Instagram, organizes its photos and things like that. Obviously if you get a lot of likes on something, it comes up in like the trends and things like that. So like all of this has to do with this kind of interaction. Okay, so let's talk about, so a micro interaction is something like that. A micro interaction, they improve a website or an app or some sort of, the navigation, getting we talked about having information that's necessary, like, in terms of information architecture. This is to help with that. It makes it easier for users to interact because they have more information. They provide some sort of feedback. Feedback is just feedback is like this. I click on this, it went from a hollow to solid. It also went from 17 to 18. That's feedback. I know that I did something. Okay, that's a micro interaction. They give tips to users. Okay. They can communicate information or certain elements. They make the general user experience much more rewarding. So, for instance, like it's literally fun to like a person's, comment, right? Or I've actually noticed this. If you go on, say, YouTube, let's say there's, here's some comedy video, right? if I click on this, that little animation, right? That's, makes it just more fun, right? A lot of times there's these little interactions, something pops open or, whatever comes up. These little pieces of information, they're interactive, right? They allow me to interact with the product. They can direct the user's attention. They also just make the site more emotional. Websites and apps have a tendency to feel a little bit sterile compared to maybe a real life scenario or real life situation. But, clicking this is like, it's literally a little fun. We click, or, I know on Instagram you like something, a little pop, a little animation occurs or something like that. So it makes the site more fun, more interesting, adds a little bit more emotion to it. So I talked about the idea that, if you like a post, you get, this is the feedback, this is the micro-interaction. All right, so all micro-interactions have 4 parts to them. What's called a trigger, rule, the feedback, and modes. So a trigger is what initiates the micro-interaction. Okay, so for instance, going back to Instagram, I want to like my friend's photo. How do I do that? Well, there is a button here, and if I click on it, I am triggering the effect of me liking it, right? Now likes have gone from 17 to 18. Okay, that's what I've done. Some triggers can be physical, meaning like you literally touch something, like, I'm touching this with my mouse, or, if it's my literal phone, I can use my finger to click on a button. They could be visual. For instance, like a good example of this would be like a security system. Like if someone shows up in a security video, once someone is detected, it may send a message to like the police or to someone. So that's like using visual information to do something, or, there's also like, you can have robots or AI where they follow like a light, like think of a stop, like a traffic light, where if it's green, you're allowed to go. If it's red, it can see the change in the color and it can stop, It might be auditory trigger. So once again, think about Alexa. When you say, Alexa, please, blah, 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 that's an auditory trigger. It's you saying something, okay? Triggers can be what are called user-initiated or system-initiated. A user-initiated trigger is when the user does something. So if I go to here and I click, that is a user-initiated. I had to do something, okay? A system trigger is when the device itself may do something. So for instance, a good example would be like, say, Wi-Fi. When my computer gets within a certain, laptops can be picked up and moved around, right? But if my laptop comes within a certain area where I have an existing internet that I've connection that I've set up in the past, it'll automatically connect for me, or at least a lot of computers will do that. So that would be a system initiated, meaning like I didn't have to do anything myself, meaning me, David Hurwitz, but the act of me just bringing the computer into the range, the computer automatically did that for me. So that would be a system initiated microinteraction, because I didn't do anything, but the system, aka the device, did something. So for instance, this could be something like saying, on your phone, it'll tell you what your reception is, right? How many bars you have. That's system initiated. You didn't have to do anything. Whereas me clicking on a YouTube video, that would be a user initiated trigger. Auditory trigger, visual, physical trigger, visual trigger. So if you unlock I forgot about unlocking with your, unlocking devices with your face. So my wife has an iPad, or she has a work computer where she unlocks it with her face. So that would be a visual micro interaction, or a trigger. like I said, another examples of system-initiated trigger would be like, what your battery life is, or whether or not you have Wi-Fi access. All right. So a trigger is whatever causes the microinteraction. Okay. The rules are what happens when the microinteraction is triggered. Okay. So, for instance, what does me clicking on this button mean? Well, what it means is that I am quote unquote liking this photo. Whatever that means. I don't really know what liking means in this case, but I'm saying to the system, there's a system here in Twitter, or sorry, Instagram. Hey, I am liking this photo, do whatever that means. That might mean adding to the number of, likes. Maybe it's going to show me more pictures of cats or something, whatever. But that is that is what the rules are, okay? If I were to click on this button here, this is a button, this is a trigger. When I click on it, the rules say, when you click on the button, a video starts. Also, the play button turns into a pause button. When you hit again, the video will pause and go back to being a play button. Okay, those are the rules, or what happens when you click with, when you interact with something. So, I already did the Instagram one, so I'm not going to do that one again. But if you remember how Zoom works, on Zoom, there's a little microphone icon. When you click on it, your audio, you could now use your microphone for your phone or your computer to speak. When you click on it again, the audio is no longer available. So those are the rules. What happens when you actually interact with something. Next is what's called feedback. Feedback lets you know what is happening. Okay. So I'm going to show you something. This is something called this is called a terminal. A terminal actually lets you talk directly to your your computer without having to go through the click interface of your OS X or your Windows operating system. And what I'm actually going to do is this. I'm going to go to the desktop. I'm actually on the desktop. I know it's hard to tell that, but trust me, I am. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a folder. I can do that by typing in mkdir, which means make directory, and I'm going to call this test folder. Okay. And I'm going to hit return. And then this is what I get. Nothing. It just gives me a new line. Did it make the folder? I don't know. Did it not make the folder? Was there a problem? I don't know. There's no feedback. I don't know what happened. You know what I mean? So I know personally, I know it did work because I know how, terminal works. And if I was to actually look for the folder, it will be there. If I find it, give me a second. There it is right there. But it's not like this gave me any particular feedback, right? So feedback is helpful. So for instance, if I click on this button to say that I want to like this photo, how do I know that I've done it? Well, here's some visual feedback. The, heart went from hollow to solid. That is the feedback. You know what I mean? Or, if I'm using, how do I know, I'm turning my volume on or off? Well, if I click on it, this is, this icon has a slash through it. If I click back, now it doesn't have a slash through it. Okay? That is the feedback. Okay? That's visual feedback. Some feedback may be auditory, which means that you might hear there might be some sort of audio instead of a visual. So for instance, I'm going to delete a file. I'm actually just going to delete this. So on a Mac, I'm just going to drag it to my trash can, and I'm going to empty my trash can. Now when I empty it, I'm going to hit empty trash, and there's that sound effect. Okay, I didn't actually see the trash. In this case, Now there actually is a change, but I wasn't watching it in time. But I did hear that sound effect, okay? And that sound effect was, the crumpling, paper sound. That was the feedback to this particular, to let me know that I've done something, okay? So, feedback may be visual, it may be auditory. It may also be haptic, okay, which means it's physical. Okay, so if you've ever played a video game that has a rumble pack in the joystick or the game controller, and your character gets hit and it starts to rumble, that's haptic feedback. It's telling you something happened by literally vibrating the game console, or the game controller, I should say. If you have your phone set to, some phones are set to vibrate, right? So instead of having an auditory feedback that someone's texting you, you have a physical feedback of literally the phone vibrates a little bit. Okay. Lastly, we have what is called the mode. Okay. The mode means, does the button always mean the same thing? So here in this example, I have this button, this play button, and if I click on it, how you feel? It plays this video, right? That's what happens here. If I hit this button again, though, it doesn't play it like it did before. It pauses it. Okay. So in this case, does the button always mean, does the button, when you interact with it, does it ever mean something other than what it normally means here? So does me interacting with this button ever change what it does? And the answer is, in this case, yes, it does. So if I click, it plays. If I click, it pauses. It doesn't play. Okay. So that's what a mode would be. Does the trigger ever do something else or mean something else other than what it normally means, essentially? Okay. So we're going to go to Pandora for a second. We're going to do another example of a microinteraction. If I can remember what my... All right, so here we are in Pandora. Okay, here is my playback, or here's the play bar. Okay, I want to like this song from the Orwells. So what I'm going to do is go to this bar here, and I'm going to click on this button. Okay, this button is a trigger. It sets a microinteraction. So this is the trigger. I click on it. What I'm doing is the rules are, by clicking on this, I am saying that I like this song. So what that means is that, this information might get stored by Pandora. It might go, oh, he must really like the Orwells, or maybe he likes, garage rock, or whatever it is that they, whatever information they're taking from it. I'm saying, hey, here's this band, here's this song, I quote unquote like this song. Okay? So that's what the rules are. By clicking it, I'm saying I like it. If I click on it again, I'm basically undoing my like. Okay? I have feedback. What is the feedback? Well, in this case, the feedback is visual. Here I have a, white thumbs up with no, backing. I click on it, it turns into a white backing with a blue thumbs up. So that would be my feedback. Finally, does this button ever mean something other than liking a song? I don't think it does. I don't really use Pandora a lot, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't really change how it works. So therefore, liking this always means that you like the song. So the trigger, the microinteraction is always basically the same. This button, all it does is it says, I like the song. It doesn't really handle anything else. It doesn't play a song. It doesn't pause a song. It doesn't search for a song. All it does is this particular action, which is I'm saying, do I like this song or not? Other buttons are other microinteraction. This would say I don't like a song. This would let me replay the song. This would let me turn the volume on and off. All of these together are small microinteractions that are part of this general experience. Being able to play, being able to pause, being able to like something, being able to unlike something, being able to adjust volume, and all these kind of interactions that can adjust my experience here.